Since it's New Year's Eve today, I'm just going to do a very short little video on the whole concept of proof. So whenever we speak about evidence, about any sort of thing, we would like to know what the standard for evidence is. And so when somebody asks to provide proof of a proposition of some theory, it's very easy to think of that as being related to the truth of that proposition. So if you want to prove that A equals B, that has some connection to whether the statement A equals B is true. And as we've already discussed, the whole notion of truth is a little bit more complicated than one would imagine it to begin with. So it stands to reason that the concept of proof as well is a bit more involved than simply establishing the truth of a proposition. Essentially, what one has to do is to figure out what one means. Are we speaking about the informal notion of truth or the formal notion of truth? And as we've established, the closer one moves towards the formal notion of truth, the more that notion breaks down. So proof can't really have much to do with the formal notion of truth. And so there needs to be some more informal notions that go along with it. And I'm not really going to discuss different burdens of proof and different standards of proof in this video tonight. But I thought I'd just speak a little bit about the whole idea of proof and power, because that's really what is at play when it comes to the idea of proof. So the notion of power coming into play when one wants to prove something is really illustrated quite nicely by what's most likely an apocryphal story about Roman bridge builders. And the original story that I heard about this had to do with Babylonian bridge builders, but I've researched it tonight for this video, and it seems that the story isn't true at all. But it's still an amusing story. So in the Roman version, how it's supposed to work was that if you built a Roman bridge, you were supposed to stand under the bridge and have a Roman legion walk over it to prove that the bridge is sound. Now, in ancient law codes, they were never quite as strict as that. And if one thinks about it, it's probably not a sensible way to test a bridge to begin with, because if the bridge is going to fall down, it might not fall down after the first legion, but maybe after the 70th legion marches over it. So it's not a great test for a bridge. But in the sort of early law codes, there usually are provisions for redress. So if you build a house and the house falls down, you have to rebuild the house. And of course, in Hammurabi's code, one of the earliest sets of laws we have, if somebody got killed when a house fell down on them, the redress was basically eye for an eye. So not exactly pleasant if you were in the business of building houses that had the habit of falling down. So the whole idea of eye for an eye in law is a fairly straightforward thing to understand, and in some ways that still sticks around in law. But the main principle underlying this is actually the whole idea of the proof needing to come from the person with power. And if one thinks of it in the sort of the broad sense, this might come across as thinking, well, in terms of Hammurabi, Hammurabi would be the one with power. He's the king after all. But in reality, there's a whole bunch of different sources of power that's going on here. Firstly, you have the person who's having the house built, who has the power not only over the builder in terms of being able to pay the builder, but also the power over the king in a certain sense. Because if people were just going around building houses that fell down and the king did nothing about it, well, the king wouldn't keep his head for too long, because people wouldn't want to live in a place like that, and so one's center of power goes away if you are not able to provide a power of redress for the public, and that power of redress is essentially what is provided by the code. It's not in the king's power. In fact, the king is effectively giving away power by giving that power of redress to the public, and that's quite an important thing if one thinks about it in terms of social organization. That the person who is nominally in power is giving up some power in order to gain more power. So it's a cyclical process, and this is a theme that I'll come back to quite a lot. The whole idea of cyclical processes like this. But there's one other element in the cycle, and that's the builder. And of course, the main thing about the builder is the builder has the power of knowledge. What materials the builder is using, the techniques in construction. Knowledge about how safe houses are built, or at least the builder is expected to have that kind of power, and so this is essentially where we have a balancing of powers between the king's power, the purchaser's power, and the builder's power, and they're all playing together. And when we're talking about the proof in this situation, the burden of proof essentially ends up falling on the person with the most power in the situation. And the person with the most power in this situation ends up being the engineer, the person who's building the building. Because the person who's building the building has all the knowledge. The king doesn't know exactly what techniques are being used. And the person who is buying the house also doesn't necessarily know all of these details. And so where the proof comes in is not just a way that the engineer can prove to the king and to the people that they are doing their job properly. It's more a case of the proof balancing the unequal centers of power in this situation, to make it so that the engineer doesn't end up with all the power, and that's basically the idea of proof that I'd like to work with going into future videos. That instead of proof being connected to the concept of truth, which we've seen is a murky and difficult issue, it's far safer to think of proof as being connected to power, and more about a balancing of power. So Happy New Year, everybody, and I'll try and make a new video in the new year, and yeah, we'll try and keep it up to one a day when I get the chance. Okay, great. So I hope 2021 is better than 2020 for most of us. So have a good one. Cheers.